we're on Chesam and Aleph. Chesam and Aleph 8A1. 8A1, which is today's daf. 8A1. And we're on in the art scroll, the right-hand column, Nema Hai Tanoim Kahai Tanoim. So we had a machlokes yesterday. About Tumah Huta B'tzibur, Tumah Duchi B'tzibur. But before that, it was the Mishnah actually, and the Gemara went into it at the beginning, compared the communal offerings, the carbon seaboards, with the Para Aduma. Meaning, just like the Kohen Gadol had to be sequestered for 7 days prior to Yom Kippur, so too the Kohen who was going to be dealing with burning the Para Aduma had to be sequestered for 7 days. Now, within this sequestering, there was another piece of the puzzle, and that is spraying with the meichatas, with the ash water. The ash water of the Para Aduma for purification purposes. And we had said, just like by the Miluyim, they had to be sprayed for all 7 days. So too, the Kohen Gadol sequestered prior to Yom Kippur needs to be sprayed, in this case, with the meichatas. And anybody dealing with the Para Aduma had to be sprayed with the meichatas as well for 7 days. Now the Gemara is going back to that and saying, is that a fact? Is that a universal fact that for Yom Kippur, the sequester of Yom Kippur, you require 7 days of spraying with the meichatas? And is that a fact that by the Para Aduma you require 7 days of spraying? So the thing to remember is like this. In fact, somebody who was Tumah Mace, who was contaminated with mace, with corpse Tumah, has to wait 7 days and is sprayed on the third day and on the fourth day. I'm sorry, on the third and the seventh day. On the third and the seventh day of the 7 days that he's waiting. That is a fact. You only have to go twice. You don't have to overdo this. We're not crazy. So twice we spray. Now, since that is actually the halacha, why in the world do we say at all that in any of these sequestering cases, whichever one you want to pick, that it requires 7 days of spraying? So this is what this Gemara is now about to embark on. And here we go. Nema Hai Tanoi Kahai Tanoi. Should we say that these following Tanoim are similar to the machlokes that we had before? And we'll see what that is. The time, because we learned. Echad Zeh, the Echad Zeh. Side, the Kohen Gadol preparing for Yom Kippur. And side, the Kohen preparing to deal with the burning of the Para Aduma. Require a 7-day sequestration. Now, besides sequestering for 7 days, we sprinkle upon them during all 7 days of the sequester. With all the purification ashes, the meichatas that were there, which, as we learned before, were a miracle that the ashes that came from the Para Aduma that Moshe brought in the wilderness, in the midbar, that Moshe Rabbeinu brought in the wilderness, like kolo, never emptied. It remained constantly, similar to the miracle that would happen later with the oil on Hanukkah. It remained constant. Divrei Rabbi Meir, so says Rabbi Meir. So Rabbi Meir holds, you sequester for 7 days and you spray for 7 days. Rabbi Yomi says, "Hey, Mazin Olav Ela Shlishi Shavi Bilvad." No, the halacha is when somebody is tumas mace and you have to spray the meichatos on him. The halacha is you only do it twice in the 7 days, the third and the seventh. So too by the sequesters over here, before Yom Kippur and before you deal with the Parah Aduma, you sequester for 7 and you spray for 3 and 7, day 3 and day 7. Rabbi Chanina Sigan Kahanim, and this is who the Rambam Paskins like. Rabbi Chanina Sigan Kahanim, Koyin asserted as a Parah Mazin Alav Kol Shiva. The Koyin who was burning the Parah Aduma, he gets sprayed all 7 days of his sequester before he deals with the Parah Aduma. 882. 882. Koyin Gadol b'Yom HaKippurim, the Koyin Gadol being sequestered for Yom Kippur, a Mazin Alav Ela Shlishi V'Shvi is only sprayed on the 3rd and the 7th. Okay, and so far we know what the machlokes is, a 3-way machlokes. Rameir says sequester for 7 and spray for 7. Sai for Yom Kippur, sai for the Parah Aduma. Rabbi Yosi says Yom Kippur. That it says in fact no. Sequester for 7, spraying only on the 3rd and the 7th day. Hanina Sagan Kahanim says, Yom Kippur, you sequestered for 7, but you only get sprayed on the 3rd and the 7th. But the kohen that's dealing with the burning of the Parah Aduma gets sprayed for all 7. So that's the 3-way machlokes. My love, the what are they arguing? Rameir holds. Rameir says 7 and 7. You sequester for 7 and you spray for 7. He says the halacha is tumah is duchya b'tzibur. The tumah is only merely pushed off in tzibur. Since the tumah is merely pushed off, we go out of our way to make sure that the kohen gadol is purified in the best possible manner. Meaning we sprinkle it when we need to, including sprinkling him on time, which is the actual 3rd and 7th day, which he could possibly become tamei. Since each day of his sequester can either be the 3rd or the 7th, since his contamination, he must be sprinkled upon every day. That's what Rashi explains. Rashi said, why are we sequestering him? We're sequestering him so that he's tahar, by the time we get to Yom Kippur. We're keeping his thoughts away from where they shouldn't go. And we're keeping him away from his wife. And we're doing everything we can humanly possibly do to keep it pure. Good. Purity requires the 3rd and the 7th day. Since any one of these could be his 3rd and 7th, how do I know that when I sequestered him, when I started the sequestration, how do I know that he wasn't tamei already? I don't know that. I don't know that he wasn't tamei yet. Maybe the whole sequester started with him being tamei already, right? Maybe he was tamei. So therefore, you need to start spraying from the 1st day, because the 1st day already might be the 3rd day from his tamei. Why do I have to be so exact? Why must it be exact? Because Rameir must hold tumah is only duchya b'tzibur, is only pushed off. Where it's pushed off, we say that the tumah actually still exists. So since the tumah actually still exists, it's not only pushed off the evet after the fact. Facto, it's pushed off because we have no choices. But in reality, the tumah is still in existence. So therefore, I go out of my way to do whatever is possible to get rid of the tumah. Mashen K. Rabbi Yosi who says you only spray on the 3rd and the 7th. That's it, only the 3rd and the 7th. Rabbi Yosi Sabat tumah is chetrehu b'tzibur. Tumah is chuter b'tzibur. And because Rabbi Yosi says since tumah is permitted, in actuality, there is no tumah. If tumah is chuter b'tzibur, then that means there is no tumah. It's chutra, it's permitted. Which means that sprinkling, in fact, sprinkling with the mei chatos, with the ash water, is in fact completely unnecessary. It's not necessary, right? It's only done as a measure of stringency, has to be as we should go out of our way, because just like the miluyim, because at the miluyim they spray, so we spray, not because of the etzem din. In halacha, in reality, if tumah is chutra b'tzibur, if tumah is permitted in tzibur, it means that there is no tumah. So I don't really require. So then I'm only going to do the minimum amount that I have to do, which is what? The third and the seventh. So that explains the machlokes. So where it says that's all very nice, you really think that's the answer? The tispera, do you really think so? Savar Rabbi Yossi. Hetehu b'tzibur, if Rabbi Yossi is the one that holds. Tuma is chutzah b'tzibur, stood that Tuma is mutter in the community. Hazah klal amali. Why do I need any sprinkling on the third and the seventh, as we just sort of explained, right? Why, if you want to go out of your way, don't do anything. Just sequester. Don't spray at all. It's going to everybody, all of these tanoim, everybody holds. Tuma is tuchyu b'tzibur. Tuma is pushed off of the tzibur. So the tuma is still around. Here's where they're on. Rameir, so Rameir holds Amri l'tshvila b'zmano mitzvah. Rameir holds going to the mikvah, immersing after the tumah is finishing, is a mitzvah, meaning the reason makdimin lemitzvahs. Those who are zoris, who are to be quick to doing a mitzvah. So if it's a mitzvah to end your tumah in time and not to schlep out the tumah, well then you're going to go ahead and account for any possible day. In other words, since he might have started the sequestering, since tumadik already, contaminated already, what is good, tumadik already. So therefore, from day one, you're going to start spraying him, so that when he finishes the seventh day, he definitely is sprayed up, and on the seventh day, he can immediately go to the mikvah. The Rabbi Yossi holds, we do not say that the immersion at its appointed time is a mitzvah. So therefore, you don't have to do more than the regular third and seventh. That's all you got to do. Says the Gemara, the Gemara doesn't like the sense. Rabbi Yossi, it's tefillah is not a mitzvah. Rabbi Yossi doesn't hold that making sure that you can travel in the exact appointed time, make that it's possible to immerse at exactly the right time is a mitzvah. But how do we learn? If a person had, for some strange reason, had written Hashem's name on his skin, if somebody writes Hashem's name on his arm, he's not allowed to wash or anoint that area, because then he'll come to erase the name of Hashem. And then erasing the name of Hashem is an ism in a Torah of Vadatem and Shemam and Amokim Mahu. You shall obliterate their names from that place regarding Avodah Zarah. And then it says, Lo yasu chen la Hashem alekechem. You shall not do so to Hashem your God. Look at number 17 in the art scroll. That brings the pasuk. So, in other words, juxtaposition within a pasuk. The Avodah Zarah, you're supposed to wash away. You shall not do so to Hashem your God. So you see, there is an isser. If you write Hashem's name on you, you're not allowed to wash it away. So, and more than that, and he's not allowed to stand in a filthy place. If a mitzvah comes about of immersion in the water and going to the mikvah, that is a mitzvah. You can underline that word right there. There you see that there's such a thing as tevila shel mitzvah. Immersion of a mitzvah comes this way. Yomi. The title, he should wrap it with a blade of grass over the name and immerse in the mikveh. The reason you do that is because grass is porous. You're not allowed to have a chatzitza, something in the place. You're not allowed to have a chatzitza, and so it doesn't interposition itself between the water and the body. To say it's us to have a chatzitza. That is why when women go to the mikveh, they have to make sure that the hair is not knotted and that there is no hairs laying on their body. That's the reason, because the hair is a chatzitza. So, says the Gemara, but you're not allowed to erase the name either, so you cover it with grass, which is porous, so some water can get in, but not enough water that will allow you to erase the name of Hashem. So says the Tanakh. Rabbi Yosi says, our same Rabbi Yosi that before seemed to be saying that toiveling on time is not a mitzvah. Rabbi Yosi says, he's allowed to go into the mikvah and toivel in the ordinary way without tying a blade of grass around it. As long as he does not rub the name itself. The Kaimalon, and we establish elsewhere in Masechta Shabbos, Daf Kuf Chav 120 and 121. What do we say? We establish the Kaimalon, the Tefillah Bizman Mitzvah Kamapliki, that they're arguing with regard of immersing at the appointed time is a mitzvah. That when the tumah is about to end, is it a mitzvah to immediately go to the mikvah? The Tanakh holds, Lo Yamrin Tefillah Bizman Mitzvah. I hold that I say it's not a mitzvah. Toivel get its exact appointed time. What is a mitzvah? I do not say that, since it's not imperative. It's not absolutely a chiyuv that a tumah person toivels himself exactly that day that the tumah is ending, where therefore we're free to put onto him the burden of going out of his way to find a grass covering for his arms so that the name of Hashem doesn't get wet, because there's no imperative to access title today. So take your time, get it wrapped correctly, and only then you'll go ahead and you'll title. Mashe gave Rabbi Yosi, our Rabbi Yosi, Sabra reading to be the Bismana mitzvah, that the immersion at the point time is a mitzvah, because he holds today is the last day of your tumah, you got a toivel. You don't have a grass thing to cover the name of Hashem. Okay, it's okay. First you deal with the mitzvah that's here. Jump into the mikvah. Just what? Don't rub the place of Hashem. But what do you see? That Rabbi Yosi does hold Tefillah Bizmana is mitzvah. If that's the case, how could we have learned before with regard to the sequestering that he only allows he only needs the spraying for the third and the seventh day, because he holds that mikvah Bizmana is not a mitzvah, which means that since we don't really actually know when the kohen became tamei, and any one of the days could be the third day and the seventh day, which means that if, let's say, day 6 turns out to really be his 7th day, he will not be available to be toivel because he will not have been sprayed with the second spraying of the 7th. So it's a steer in Rabbi Yosi. Says the Gemara 883, and it goes off. It says no. Everybody agrees, Rameya and Rabbi Yosi, that toiveling in time when the tumah is over is a mitzvah. But this is what they're clicking, much more practical. Rameya is some makshin nazol tefillah. Rameya holds we compare the sprinkling to the tefillah, to the immersion, and says just like there's a mitzvah to immerse on time, so there's a mitzvah to sprinkle at the appointed time. So the Kohen Gadol must be sprinkled all 7 days to ensure that if he's contaminated, He sprinkled on the third and seventh day of his contamination. He says we do not compare sprinkling to immersion. So there's no mitzvah to sprinkle on time. Therefore, it's enough to do the third and the seventh. Because Rabbi Yossi is saying, regardless, we're making you sequester for 7 days. Since we're making you sequester for 7 days, and it's true that we want you to table exactly on time or be available to table exactly on time, but here the sequestering takes precedence. Since the sequestering is regardless for 7 days, so you're not going to be able to table until the 7th day, regardless. We're not letting you out until the 7th day. Guess what? I'm only sprinkling you the 3rd and the 7th. Some other day might be the reality 7th. There's no mitzvah that I have to spray you on time. There's only a mitzvah that I have to tell you. You have to be able to be toivel on time. But since over here, we're only going to be sequestering for 7 days, so the actual tevilah is not taking place until the 7th day. And it doesn't really matter because I don't require the spraying on time. I only require that you toivel on time. Here, the toiveling on time is the actual 7th day. So I only require 2 sprayings, the 3rd and the 7th. Now, we now explain Rameh and Rabbi Yossi. Now we turn to Rav Chanina Sagan Khan. He split the baby. He said, the kohen being sequestered for Yom Kippur only requires the 3rd and the 7th. The kohen that's going to deal with the Parah Aduma requires spraying all 7 days. Now, Rav Chanina Bar Sagan Kahanim, what does he hold? If he's going to compare the sprinkling to the immersion in water, then even the kain before Yom Kippur should be sprinkled every 7 days. Because just like you have to spray on time and you have to go to the mikvah on time, so if everything is on time, then why does he allow the kain gadol to only do the 3rd and the 7th when he's sequestered before Yom Kippur? He should have to spray every day. But if he does not compare sprinkling to immersion, then why does he require the kain that's dealing with the paraduma to spray 7 days? It should be enough. The 3rd and the 7th. Says the Gemara. The truth is, does not compare sprinkling to immersion. The kain asaref is a param malaba'alma. It's merely a good thing, and it's merely a stringency that we put on it more than we did by the Yom Kippur. We go ahead and we spray it. Many extra steps were kept to keep the Torah, the Parah Aduma, burned the Parah Aduma, removed from any hint of Tumah, and emphasize the state of Tahara. Since the whole purpose of the Parah Aduma was to come and to purify, to metaher everybody with its mechatos, we went out of our way to overdo and be mefarsem and to make it clear. We marketed the purity of the Parah Aduma because the Parah Aduma, the red heifer, was so rare. Every time you dealt with it, it was a rare occurrence. We've been waiting 2,000 years for a true Parah Aduma. It hasn't appeared in 2,000 years. A Parah Aduma is a cow that has less than 2 hairs of another color. We haven't found it. Now, so it's so rare. And the whole purpose of it is to mitar tameim, to purify the contaminated. So we went out of our way to make sure that the kohen, who was going to deal with it, was tar. So the extra spraying is merely a way of accentuating this reality. It's not a din. And that is, in fact, the way we paskin, because we paskin Rav Chanina Sagan Khan. Let's go a little further. Man says the Gemara Vaita, man knows the law that's on Rabbanon. This following brisa goes according to whose opinion? Ein bein hakoyin asarif and sapar the koyin b'yom kippurim. There is no differences between the koyin who burns the Parah Aduma and the Kohen Gadol of the Yom Kippurim, Ella, except we're now on 8b, 8b1, Ches Amid Beis, except Shezeh Pirusha Kedusha. Regarding the Kohen Gadol's by Yom Kippur, before Yom Kippur, his sequestering is for Kedusha, for holiness, for sanctity. And since it's not about Tumah, his fellow Kahanim can actually touch it. We're not worried about Tumah. But regarding the Kohen who will burn the paraduma, he's separated because of purification. And therefore his fellow Kahanim, who they themselves might be Tumah, are not allowed to touch it. Kiman. Okay, and the reason for this is very possible. If you all remember, the Kohen who would burn the paraduma, when he was sequestered, they had this thing that on the last day, on the day they would deliberately go ahead and be mitama the Kohen God, the Kohen who was dealing with the paraduma. They would deliberately take a sheretz and be mitama him, and then or they would take a dead person, and at the beginning of the sequestering they would be mitama him, in order to push out the eyes of the Sadducees, to push out the eyes of the Tzedaikim. The Tzedaikim held that when a person tovels on the seventh day of the Tumah, they still have to wait to Harib Shemesh. Not only, they have to wait for nightfall. It's not enough that they're a Tvul Yoim, that they toveled on the seventh day. They have to wait until the nighttime, Harib Shemesh, to go ahead and deal with Kotshim. Now, everybody agrees with that, except with the Paraduma. The Chazal learned it out of the Psukim that the Paraduma only requires Tivul Yain. It only requires toveling, immersing in the mikvah. The moment you immerse in the mikvah, the Kohen who deals with the Paraduma is allowed to deal with the Paraduma. The Sadducees, the Tzedaikim, who only believed in Torah Shebiksav, said no. The Paraduma also required. It's not enough that he's a Tavul Yaim. He needs to wait out of Shemesh. He has to wait till the nighttime until he can deal with the Paraduma. So they deliberately were metama the Kohen who was sequestered with the Paraduma in order to make sure that they could stick it in the eye of the Sadducees that we were metama him. We tovel him on the seventh day, and immediately we put him to work on the Paraduma. Okay, this, by the way, just as an aside, as you know, every religion requires a reformation. As we know, the Catholics and the Dark Ages required Luther and the Reformation, and its side body, its secular reality, the Renaissance. Islam hasn't really gone through this exactly, though it did at the times of the early years, of the times before the Alamites came about, which was the Taliban of their time, in the 11th century, in the time of the Rambam. Under Suleiman the Great of Turkey, it sort of came back a little bit, but by and large, they have not. We never had a reformation. You know why? Because we immediately had a Torah Shebal Peh that was overlaid over the Torah Shebiksav. So for an example, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. Right away, we said, of course, it doesn't mean that you poke out the other guy's eye. What good is that? What does it mean? Money, right? You pay the value. That's the basic. Most people don't know that outside of Judaism. Most people don't understand that because they don't know from the Torah Shebal Peh that was immediately overlaid over the Torah Shebiksav. The biggest one is in Parashas Shoftim. We all know who are our mortal enemies. Amalek, and the Shever Amamim, and the 7 nations, Canaan, Canania, Moiria, Priziba, Ibushiba, Goshi. Says the Chumash at the end of the Chumash, at the end of Shoftim, if you should go to war with them, you first have to offer them peace terms. Says the Chinuch, says the Minchas Chinuch, actually. Says the Minchas Chinuch, it says you still, the Chinuch says this actually, when you still have to go ahead, when you have to offer peace terms, that's afilu amalek, afilu sheva amamim. Afilu amalek and afilu sheva amamim. What's pshat? The Chinuch says like this, not because they deserve it, but because we, Zera Kodesh, the holy seed, it's his words, poetic, need to be Rachum v'Chanun, not need to be merciful and compassionate, not we should act with mercy and compassionate. We need to be internally, automatically compassionate and rachamim. And so you have to go ahead and offer peace terms to everybody, not because they deserve it, because we have to be on a higher level. Now, you tell that to anybody. Now, that's ridiculous. The Torah commands us to destroy Amalek. The Torah commands us to fight against the 7 Amalek. And yet, it tells us to offer them peace terms. The answer is because we already had the Torah Shel Baal Peh that explained where I command you as a mitzvah, mechemes mitzvah, which was only in reality in the time of the wilderness and when they came into Eretz Yisrael. But outside of that, there really was never a mechemes mitzvah. It's really only mechemes rishus. It's only a permitted thing. There, you have to answer. It doesn't matter who you're dealing with. You have to try to make peace terms. That is the idea over here. And when we're doing those things over here, that's what we were dealing with the tzedakah. The thing with the tzedakah, the Sadducees, is when you look at a thing and you freeze it in time. You freeze it in time and words without realizing that, of course, the words are like a rock that require you to lift it up and see that there's an entire world living underneath every single word. And that's why we have a Gemara. That's why we had it. This was all there from the beginning. It was all overlaid. The words are the words, and now you need to come to explain the words. You need to work out what's really going on. They did not. They were stuck in time. And that is why the Sadducees disappeared. Because such thinking is reactionary to the extreme and has nothing to do with Yiddishkeit. The rest of the world has taken a long time to come around to understand that. Anyways, let's go further. So, the Ein Achim Kahanim Noigim Boy, and the brothers cannot touch him. The brothers cannot touch him because he's in fact Tamei, because we deliberately made him Tamei. Come on, who's this opinion? Because if it follows with Chanin Sagan there's another difference between the 2 Kahanim, and that's the number of days on which it needs to be sprayed. Since this Bryce has said there's no difference between the Kayin who deals with the Paradum and the Kayin who's sequestered by Yom Kippur, except that this one is for Kedusha, and this one is for Tahara, and the Kahanim by Yom Kippur, his fellow Kahanim can touch him, but by the Paradum they cannot. There is another difference. The amount of days of spraying, according to Rav Chanina by Sagan Kahanim, Yom Kippur only requires the 3rd and the 7th, while the Paraduma requires all 7 days. So the Tana of this price, it cannot be Rav Chanina Sagan Kahanim. Now, we're going to stop in 7 minutes, wherever we get to here. It's understandable that the Kayin who is being sequestered with regard to the Paraduma, you spray him on the 1st day, because perhaps that's the third day of its contamination. I don't know when it got contaminated. Sheni, Shemesh Shlishi, the second day, because perhaps that's the third day. Shalishi, Shemesh Shlishi, maybe it's exact. The third is perhaps his day. Chamishi, we skip over Revi, Shemesh Shavi. The fifth day is maybe the seventh day. Shishi, Shemesh Shvi. The sixth day could be the seventh. Shvi, Shemesh Shvi. The seventh could be the seventh. Ela Revi, Lomali Azov Cloud. The fourth day, what do I need to sprinkle them at all? It's not part of this possibility of that it's the third day from the beginning, but and it's not possibly on the seventh day. So says the Gemara in the typical Jewish fashion, it tries to answer the question with another question. But according to you, how do you come up with spraying all 7 days? We learned that in fact the sprinkling is only rabbinic in nature and therefore does not override the Shabbos restrictions. Now, what's the problem with sprinkling with water on Shabbos? It looks like misaking. It looks like you're finishing. What is misaking? You're fixing something up so that it becomes usable. Well, by making the koyin from Tomei to Tahar, from contaminated to purity, you're fixing the koyin. You're being misaking the koyin. So therefore, the Rabbanim say, since I'm telling you that spraying is in fact only rabbinical in nature, and therefore it looks like misake, it's muksa, and and it does not override the Shabbos restrictions. So in that case, the kohen cannot be sprinkled on the Shabbos of the week in which he was sequestered. So what are you going to say? So that he was sprinkled all 7 days, Shiva Labar b'Shabbos, 7 days except for Shabbos. Hachanami with regard to the sequestering, Shiva Labar Miravi. We'll have to say that Bryce is talking about he sprinkled all 7 days except for the 4th day. Amarava, Hilkov, therefore. Koyin got to be Yom Kippur. The sequestered Koyin before Yom Kippur. The Loivi and Talia Milsa, which is not dependent on us. Ela Bikia the Yarchatal Samilsa. The whole thing is tied on when we establish the beginning of the month. Yom Kippur is on the 10th of Tishrei. When is the 10th of Tishrei? Based upon when we establish the beginning of Tishrei, right? We go to Bezdin and we have to establish a month. We got two different days which it could be established. So we establish it. Therefore, but to loss of a Tishrei, inevitably he must be sequestered from the 3rd of Tishrei by La Prusha, as we said, which is 7 days before Yom Kippur. This way we got ourselves covered. The whole aim is this Rabbi to loss of a Tishrei, and whenever the 3rd of Tishrei occurs, we sequester it, regarding which day of the week of it. So if the 4th day falls on any other day of Shabbos, right? If the 4th day of the sequestering is on a Monday, for an example, therefore that means 2 days of sprinkling must be omitted. Shabbos and the 4th day. With regard to the sequestering of the kohen who's going to burn the paraduma, to be done, Talian will say it's in our hands, because it's not tied to the day of the month. It's the day when we say, oh, okay, this is the day we're going to burn the paraduma. Well, that means 7 days prior, we've got to sequester the kohen. Therefore, it's tied to us. We automatically then sequester him on a Wednesday. In other words, we always burn the paraduma on another Wednesday. So that the 4th day, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Shabbos, the 4th day will always fall out on a Shabbos, and we don't need to kick out another day of spring. Great, guys. This is where we're stopping. We're up to the 2 dots. Lishchas Parhadrin. This is where the Kohen Gadol was moved to the Parhadrin chamber in the Beis Hamikdash, on the Temple Mount in the Beis Hamikdash. This is where we will continue tomorrow. Perfect.